Alright, cohort, it is Saturday morning, which means that it is time for Pilum Teaches DCS. This is where we get up to some shenanigans, do a little bit of hands-on live teaching here on the stream, and for those who are re-watching this later as some kind of a VOD, or perhaps on the YouTube channel when it goes up there, something that you can watch and re-watch, hopefully for some helpful hints and tips. So today we're going to be covering more of the F-4E Phantom 2, and we're going to be starting all over from the beginning. So if you've not seen things like this before, this is a good place to start. We're going to go through the cockpit overview, startup, navigation, and an introduction to my mission that I use for a type of range, which actually uses the NTTR mission. So it's a lot of interesting fun there. So with that, let's just go ahead and start, as we will start all of these here with a walk around the jet. Now we are at the moment cold and dark, and we are also on pause, but we have our F4 Phantom covered in a customized 01 paint scheme. It's got some of my own logos and other things on it. From the outboard pylon working inboard, we have GPU 10s, AIM-9L Sidewinders, AGM-45A Shrikes, Mark 83 bombs in the centerline, Sparrows in the well. We also have the Pave Spike Pod. Laser guided bombs would be kind of useless without it. And we mirror that loadout here on the other side. Alright, so let's go ahead and settle in here in the cockpit. We're in the front seat at the moment, and I'm still paused. I'm going to leave it cold and dark just so we could talk about each of the different sections of the cockpit. And we're going to work this one from left to right. Starting at the furthest aft, on the left side, we have the oral tone controller. This is useful for controlling the feedback tone for the Shrike and some of the other systems on board the jet. It does not play into the AOA indicator, which is a different knob that we'll talk about a little bit in just a moment when we get to the other side of the jet. We also have our intercom volume and intercom modes, as well as a radio override or a cold mic push to talk on the intercom arrangement. That does work with SRS as well if you're using that as a chat service or the in-game voice feature. We have our chaff, burst, flare, salvo settings, which determines how many are pushed on each push of the countermeasures button and what the interval is in milliseconds between bursts. We have our steps up or down indicator, our countermeasure system, whether or not it is in active mode or not. The Wizzo has the controls to set that. We have fuel dump indicator. This is our fuel system panel, which includes our air refueling door. You should probably have that one bound to a key, because if you are trying to connect to a tanker and you disconnect for whatever reason, you will need to close and reopen the door in order to get that working again. We have checks for our boost pumps, our fuel tank selector switch. Up is for the wing stations, and down is for the centerline station, middle is off. Internal wing transfer switch. Back here we also have a ground safety switch for the aircraft. Which we can use to fire the gun on the ground. It's this aft one here on the panel. Continuing forward, we have our flaps indicator and lever, an emergency lever, which you can grab the top on and roll it down to deploy the flaps or slats in emergency mode. That is a one-way trip, so if you use that handle, they are going to be in whatever position it is you put them in. A signal eject to the Wizzo button. Not really functional for what we're doing, so No need to really worry about that. A circuit breaker for the standby attitude and brightness control. Standby attitude indicator. This panel controls our stability augmentation system, as well as the autopilot, which has a AFCS mode. We're just turning the autopilot on and provide a little more extra stability, and an altitude hold, which needs to be engaged. Our ILS nav system panel. You need to have the volume up at least a little bit to be able to use the VOR ILS. Drag chute handle, which also, when pulled, will deploy the drag chute. It will also arm the drag chute release, which is a button on the inside of the handle. Pushing on the handles button will disconnect the drag chute, and then you can action the handle back down to close it. Throttle quadrant with engine igniters. Next forward. Also got the pull tabs to get that out of the idle detent. Master engine control panel, or master modes for the engines left and right. Rudder trim is available here as well. The engine starter switch is here for getting the engines up and running. Maverick contrast polarity switch is also here. Engine anti-ice and antenna selection, whether using the upper or lower antenna, also on this panel for the front seat. Forward of that, we have the hand control unit. This is useful for steering the Maverick seeker head and primarily for steering the bullpup missile. Forward of this, we have the onboard oxygen and its settings. We have really a no-function volume control for canopy or low altitude, anti-skid system for the brakes, as far as whether or not it's enabled. Moving up to the kind of glove panel here, we have our slats and flaps indicator, our gear indicator, boost pumps, and their current functionality, our trim, external lights for the taxi and landing light on the nose wheel, and an emergency stores jettison, and the aileron rudder disconnect circuit breaker. Pulling that one will disable the aileron rudder disconnect, or interconnect rather. Of course, we have the emergency canopy jettison switch, emergency brake clearly labeled, the primary gear handle. The AVTR recording lamp serves two purposes. First, it lets you know that the system is on, but the dimmer switch on it, where you can rotate the knob to brighten or dim the bulb, controls the volume for the onboard tape deck. Continuing here with the front panel, we have our clock, true airspeed indicator, which is different from indicated airspeed. Talk about that one a little bit later on, but most of the systems on board the jet, when you are communicating through either the bombing computer or making those calculations, rely on true airspeed. So the pilot does have an indicator here, but it is a lot more hidden compared to the weapons systems officer's display. Flight instrument brightness control knob. Bomb fuse arming switch. It's currently in the off position, but it has positions for nose, tail, and nose and tail. Radar altimeter. Airspeed gauge. Primary ADI ball. And the standard or primary synchronization switch. Marker beacon overflight light. Altimeter. Moving back here onto the left, as before we talk about the engine gauges here on the right, is the pylon selector, master arm switch, weapon delivery mode wheel, weapon selector wheel, our display letting us know what air-to-air weapons are available and whether or not they are armed, the radar missile continuous wave radar mode being turned on, the interlock, a centerline fuel tank or bomb rack interference light letting us know that that's there, our timing interval setting for dropping bombs or shooting rockets, multiplier switch for the interval, either 1x or 10x, and a quantity selector here. Now this one does have some self-explanatory parts. For example, it is set right now to drop just one bomb. And you can see as we move around the wheel, it goes from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 12, 18 bombs. And we have 3 other modes, C, S, and P. C is for continuous, where it will continue firing weapons off of the selected pylons until there's nothing left, as long as you're holding the button down. S is for salvo mode. Salvo mode is extremely helpful there for us when we're trying to deploy a swath of rockets at once. It's a pretty good example for that. What it does is it fires one weapon off of each of the sub-pylons. So for example, if you have a triple rack of rockets, if you're firing it in continuous mode, it would drain one pylon, then the next one, and then the next one on the same rack. If you're firing in salvo mode, it will shoot rockets from all 3 pods simultaneously. So S is not single here, S is salvo. Just as P is not pairs, P is pylon. So if you had, weapon stations left, center, and right selected because you got bombs there, if it's in pylon mode, it will drop one bomb from all 3 pylons at the same time when you push the button. We have the selective jettison switch, which includes positions for the sparrows, left forward, right aft, left aft. Our compass, which this one is a gyro compass that is tied into the navigation system. Moving over to the right, of course, we have the altimeter, engine fire warning lights, fuel in total pounds available in the internal tanks. This does not take into account any of your externals, as it more or less just saps fuel from them intermittently. It doesn't drain fuel continuously from the fuel tanks. Fuel flow gauges, vertical speed indicator, standby ADI, our master nav mode indicator, and our flight director mode indicators. Engine RPM percentages, engine temperatures, and nozzle position. On the center box, we have our radar or TV selector switch for the DSCG screen, our accelerometer, which shows G load on the jet, gun high-low rate selector, gun pod clear mode switch, whether it's auto clear or don't clear it, rounds remaining counter, this is for the internal gun, pneumatic pressure availability, hydraulic pressure availability in both the primary 1 and 2 systems and the utility system, engine oil pressure, our missile reject norm direction finding switches, and our Shrike primary and secondary band switches. Over here to the right, we have our scrambler setting, the KY28. Really doesn't do a whole lot for us in DCS, but nice that it's there. We have our hook lever rather, our master caution panel, master caution reset, TAC and control panel for navigation. It's currently set to 12 X-ray, which is right here at Nellis. Communication panel, this is our primary radio panel. There is only one radio really available for us to transmit on in the jet, but there is a guard frequency that can be set in the mission editor, as well as these alternate aux frequencies and everything else that can be programmed that way. Channel selectors are there, manual selector on across the top. Mode switch to preset or manual is available there, and as well as the radio master operating mode, which simultaneously operates where this top indicator is pointed, as well as the bottom for the auxiliary channel selector. Cabin pressure and cabin pressure dump, pitot heat, rain removal system, generator switches, our IFF control panel. You don't really need to set a transponder frequency here. The jet, as long as the system is on, will transmit a friendly to your appropriate side as far as the signal goes. But you can set the transponder signal and it will operate with things like LOT ATC, as well as SRS and other transponder-based programs. So whatever you set there will make that work. Our helmet's currently sitting on the rail there. Back here we pretty much have our cockpit temperature changing, cockpit lights, so your internal light switches are all here. The DCU-94 station selector, none of this really matters or is functional there for us because we don't have nuclear stores there. And we have a master test for the DCU modes behind it. Those are there mostly for people's immersions, I suppose. Continuing aft, we have the master recording box, which we can pop this tape out of and flip it around to the Meteor soundtrack, so that way when the video recording system is played, it will instead play the music rather than record screenshots every few seconds to provide you with gun camera footage. We have our compass mode selectors and switches here, so we can try and solve compass related problems when that system degrades or is otherwise damaged. So we can set the compass heading, press to rotate, set which mode, hold the mode to try and sync it to the gyros on board the jet. And last but not least, all the way aft, tucked in here from the shoulders, are exterior light switches and their mode settings. Coming back up into the front seat to the top portion of our front display, because we didn't talk about that here very much, but we're going to now. We have our weapon release computer system, control system settings. This little box here will display ranging information when it is turned on and enabled, whether that is coming from the laser or from the radar. We can manually set our desired release range through controlling this knob, otherwise it can be controlled from the back. We can change which ranging mode we're using, whether it's the WRCS, a set mode, or the radar. We have a display brightness that we can use. We have a test display button that we can use. This lighted panel here is the air-to-air master armament panel. The lowermost one displays whether or not master arm is on or off. The top three boxes there display radar, heat, or gun. You kind of see those not illuminated because they're kind of in a standby type mode there since we're paused. Moving up to our combat display, we have all of the brightness and control knobs. They are two-stage. They have an upper and a lower. We have the collimator shutter, open and close. We have our Pipper HUD mode master selects, which is off standby, which is warming the system up. Cage, which has it fixed to a default position. Air to ground, air, and then 2 bit modes to test the Pipper to see how it works. And our reticle depression settings there in mil dots. We also have in-range lights on this panel. The center screen is our repeater for the WIZO's radar or TV display. The numbers here across the top indicate which range band the radar is currently set to from the WIZO. And we have a wheel warning light for when we are low airspeed and everything else. It should flash to let you know that your wheels are up when the computer system thinks they should be down. Exercise your own judgment there. We have our RWR panel. It is an older RWR system, which we'll talk about in greater detail during a later phase. But for now, we just need to know that it is here and its control panel is under it. And then we have our pod's line of sight indicator. Green is good. The white dotted lines are cautions, and the hard lines here on the end are the stops as far as what your actual pod limits are relative to how you're flying. You're going to want to try and keep that in the green as much as you can to allow the pod to have its best chance of staying on target and being easy for the WIZO to steer. Outside of that, we have our shoot cue lights. There are 3 of them. Center line, 2 left, 2 right, or 1 left, 1 right. We have our standby compass. And up at the very top, we have air refueling lights, ready, indicating that we are ready to receive fuel. We have full lights for our fuel tanks if we are carrying external tanks. Those will light up and say full when they are filled. The tanker will not automatically finish topping the aircraft off and then go, okay, cool, we're done, transfer complete. So you have to wait until you see the lights lit up as full to indicate that your fuel tanks are in fact full. And those are the external tanks only. Internally, you have about 12,000 pounds worth of gas. That will top the aircraft off. But they are in this position here because you're probably going to be looking through the front of the aircraft to study the lights, so this is going to be in your peripherals to let you know that you're there. And we have a disengage light, which is when you have either forced to disengage for the refueling or have fallen off the boom for one reason or another. That pretty much does it for the front seat. I'm not going to go into the back seat today. That's going to be a separate phase. But let's go ahead and get started. We do have an ad break coming up here shortly. I have snoozed through a few of those while we've been getting this going, but let's go ahead and unpause. And we'll talk a little bit about starting the jet and some of the bindings that we've got. The first most important one that we have is to adjust controls just to tap the button. The gesture UI action. The other button that we're going to be using a lot and needs to make sure that's bound is its contextual action, short hold and double click. We're going to go a short press on the UI action, which pulls up Jester's wheel. And this is how we can communicate with the crew chief. Now at the moment we don't have any power at all on the jet. Master arm switches are off. The generators are off. There's no battery power on right now, so we have no radio. We can only communicate with the crew chief through hand signals. Apparently having the cockpit open is not enough to talk to him out there. But that's okay. Now I have already called for, under air source, to load starter cartridges, which is a more expedient method of starting the jet. We're going to be using that one today. And to do that, we've already had the cartridges loaded, so we're going to go ahead and turn on both master engine modes, take the throttles out of detent into idle. I'm also going to take this time to turn on my stability augmentation system, activate my onboard oxygen, put it in normal mode, turn the anti-skid on. I've already set my TACAN system to be active, my radio to be active, my radio to be on, my IFF to be on, but I'm going to go ahead and set my usual transponder codes of 42, as that is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. Turn on the generators, and Jester should communicate with us and say, what alignment do we want? There are 3 options. We have the bath alignment, which is the least efficient and degrades the fastest, stored heading memory, which is kind of the best of both worlds, and a full alignment, which takes a little over 8 minutes to do. We're going to do a stored heading alignment.
Roger that, stored heading alignment.
Take this time to put my helmet on. And I'm going to hold both igniter switches. Those are depressed. And then I'm going to toggle left and right the engine starter switches, which fires the shotgun shells. And I'm going to hold those igniters while the engines come up to power. I'm also going to tap the RWR power switch, because as soon as the generators have power, the RWR will click on. And we can let go of the igniters.
You got the gennies going, I can start the alignment.
Jester needs generator 2 to be active.
Roger.
In order for him to align the jet. So you either need to have ground power on and have this generator acting in external mode, or have main power on the engine, at least one engine going, preferably the right engine, and then turn the right engine generator on so he's got power. At this point, there's little else to do but wait, so I tend to use this time frame to go ahead and set up other things in the jet, like turn on the continuous radar mode, continuous wave mode rather, so we can actually use our Sparrows. It takes a few seconds for that to warm up. Sometimes I'll even adjust my bombing information here as far as my release timer and release quantity for something that I will need in the future. We will reset the CADC corrections, which will then allow us to take the altimeter out of its flagged secondary mode and put it into its primary electric mode rather than pneumatic, and take the time to set up our radar altimeter. I tend to go with about 500 feet. Unlike the F-14, you don't get a tone that lets you know you're passing through that altitude, but you do get the warning light that comes on when you pass through. We'll also go ahead and bring the canopy down. We can start setting our lights up as desired if we needed to. Verify we got our aviators on, and we do.
And locked, lights out, and stripes aligned.
Set ourselves up for the radar on the DCS or DSCG. And I usually select low gun rate to try and conserve some of that ammunition there for us. And since we use the starter cartridges rather than the power carts and huffers and everything else to get this thing going, they've already taken those away, and the ladder has been removed automatically as well. I will talk briefly about the... sounds like he's done now. Yeah, he's done.
Completed. Go primary sync now. We're ready to
briefly about the process on that. Basically, you have to warm up the gyro and get it up to an ambient temperature so that it is working properly. And then it will align the jet's onboard INS system. It does drift over time.
Roger.
As far as navigation goes, because we're going to be talking about that next now that the jet has started up,
Wheel chalks out. Chalks out.
there's a few ways that it can be done.
Looking good. Have a good flight.
The
And
easiest when you're working with something like Jester is to simply use a map marker where allowed on the server. We're going to pull up the Jester wheel, and we'll talk a little bit about this real quick too while we're getting through there. Crew Chief obviously is only accessible to you when you are on the ground, stopped, which allows communication with the Crew Chief. You can call for wheel chocks, external power, external air sources, boarding ladder and steps informations, communications check if you wanted to go through a full startup, ground checks if you wanted to go through that. Some of the campaign missions require things like that too. The crew contract. You can set Jester's presence through a few different settings there. Generally, I leave him on auto. Jester talking, I will usually tell him to shut up when I go to refuel because the lag between him giving a voice line versus where you're actually present behind the tanker gets desynced very quickly. And then he just ends up talking for like 15-20 minutes, feeding you bad information when you're trying to connect to the jet. So I usually tell him to quiet down when we get to the tanker and talk to me when we're done. The ejection switch, by default, he will only kick himself out of the back of the aircraft. I usually have him set it to both, so that when he leaves, I leave. Countermeasures dispensing, you can set this. Jester will try and dispense countermeasures on his own by default. If you would prefer he not do that, you can set it to manual, and then you're the one with full control. Systems here includes the AVTR recorder, which is where you can have Jester turn that system on or off. Jammer, if you have it on board, you can have it in transmit or standby mode. You can have him jettison flares.
60, 30.
You can have him tell you how many chaff and flare you have available and set different chaff and flare modes through systems. Navigation is the big one that I tend to use. Here you can have him attempt to final line the INS if you've been flying for a little bit to try and remove some correction. It doesn't do all of it. Some of that you have to do on your own, which we'll show you here a little bit later on. TACAN navigation, if you want him to be in control, you can have him set a TACAN channel. You can add to the flight plan and add new waypoints to the aircraft that weren't present before, keeping in mind that only 2 can be saved and stored at a time. The rest of them he has to encode as you leapfrog through them, very similar to the F-14. Holding patterns, go to resumes, where you can select which waypoint you want to go to. Divert to is the one that I use a lot, and it's here where I can do things like divert to a map marker. You can select your own markers for maps that your mission markers that you put down, all markers for ones that the mission editor put down, and then TGT1. It doesn't have to be named TGT1, you can put whatever name you want on it, but he will tell you steering set for diversion. And now we are set to point at that waypoint. We're going to start taxiing up here. Don't need a whole lot of oomph to get going, and once you get rolling, you really don't need a whole lot to keep it maintained. You have to press and hold the nose wheel steering button during the entire time that you're trying to turn. And since this is an Air Force jet with Navy origins, it does have high gain steering by default. So if you really want to heel the rudder over when you have the nose wheel steering button down, you can turn the aircraft almost within its own wingspan, which is important for ground handling. While we are taxiing here for takeoff, Jester will ask whether or not we are going to be flying high or low.
Roger.
Really doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on what he does. It's more for immersion sort of sake. But I'm also going to take this time to drop the flaps, which is 2 ticks to take off in landing position, and adjust the nose trim down 3 points. That is the takeoff trim position. A lot of other aircraft use a trim up, but the F-4 uses a trim down, nose down by 3 points. You can tell on that selector there. Or on that gauge, rather. Depending upon the loadout of your aircraft, she will either be easy to rotate and take off at about 150 knots, or she's going to need a little bit more oomph to get down the runway. How you take off is kind of up to you, but generally speaking, the heavier you are loaded, the earlier you're going to want to put that stick all the way back to try and get that nose wheel up and off the tarmac. Some things to keep in mind though, and this is just physics really. First one is that your engines are set a little inboard compared to your tail, and your tail has some serious droop to it, so you can't pull that tail all the way back and put yourself in like a 20-degree nose up position without causing a tail strike and potentially removing your drogue chute, your stabilizers, causing a whole host of problems for yourself. When the F-4 is very heavily laden, one of the methods that they had recommended in real life to taking off is what they call the full aft stick method. In which case, from the moment of takeoff, you pull that stick all the way back into your gut and you just hold it there. As the aircraft gets up to speed and reaches a nose wheel liftoff speed, you'll ease back on the stick to maintain about a 10 degrees nose attitude up with full afterburner going, and let the aircraft fly itself off the runway. Can't really pull up any harder than that, otherwise you risk that tail strike. But you're trying to get that lift underneath the wings to get up and off the ground, especially with a very heavy bomb load. Clean and low fuel, she will float at 150 knots. Fully laden, fully topped off and everything else, you might not even get off the ground until you're closer to 200 knots or more. We are lined up on the runway. I'm holding the brakes. And we're going to go ahead and pull the throttles slowly all the way up to full power. Move them right through the detent for the afterburner. And then release the brakes as she starts to move. We are heavy, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that stick all the way back.
Airspeed's coming alive. 80 knots.
Rudder authority starts at about 80 knots, at which point you definitely shouldn't be using nose wheel steering. 150 knots, we're starting to see the nose come up. And we're airborne. Flaps coming up, gears coming up. Ideally, you want to try and have your flaps up at about 225 knots.
Flaps up.
And your gear up by about 250 knots. We got positive rate. I went ahead and pulled the throttles back to military power. Just to say non-afterburning maximum thrust. Now we're just going to adjust the trim. Slowly nose up as we ease off the stick. Just to maintain our gentle climb. As we turn, broadly speaking, towards our waypoint, heading towards Creech Air Force Base and our target area beyond.
Okay, nails, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and nails, 3 o'clock.
Okay, so as we roll out here, we're going to talk a little bit about navigation. And there's a few things that you have to understand about the F4 because it does matter as time goes on. The first one is that your INS will drift. It doesn't matter if you take the time to go the full 8 to 11 minutes for a full alignment,
12 o'clock. AAA.
or if you did a stored heading alignment for just a few minutes, or if you did the bath alignment for just a couple of minutes, your alignment system will drift. This gauge will become inaccurate over time without corrective input applied. If you've got a human backseater that you can coordinate with, you can pick a landmark that you can get some coordinates for, like just as a local example here, if we went with one of the peaks of Mount Charleston. Now, this might be a known reference point there for us. You can kind of see the lat-long coordinates both here and up here in the top left corner for wherever the cursor's at. The Wizzo can take the system out of its synced nature and desync it on purpose, put in the corrective information for a known point, and then as we fly over that point, reset the system and realign the gyros to that point. That will take care of the correction and make your gauges more accurate again. Otherwise, you're looking at approximately a 3 nautical mile drift in full alignment at about every hour or so. The system will drift up to 3 nautical miles just on its own, direction random. It will do that at about 30 to 45 minutes in stored heading mode, and it will do it in 30 minutes or less in bath alignment mode. And the problem in bath alignment is that that drift also can go out to sometimes 5 to 7 nautical miles, so it can really throw you off and not provide you with good steering information. So you really do need to kind of look outside the jet, get some physical landmarks, coordinate with the F10 map, whatever it is you need to do some dead reckoning guidance to go from point A to B. If you have TACAN beacons, you can make that a little easier. Right now we are tuned to Nellis Air Force Base's TACAN at 12 X-ray. And if we come up here to our navigation input mode, currently we're in Nav Computer, which is the onboard navigation settings set by Jester. You can toggle the switch over to TACAN, and the arrow will now point at the TACAN beacon and provide us with distance. If we had access to a VOR or ILS beacon, we could turn on the volume, which will turn on the system. And as long as our frequency selected is correct, which I will go ahead and take the time now to set it up for Nellis for when we need it later, you can come down to VOR TACAN, and it will provide you with the INS lineup information. Of course, you also need to turn the flight director on.
That's a new bogey, all right. On the right gimbal, 37 miles, 20,500. IFF is good. That is a friend.
So we're going to go ahead and put that back in NavComp mode just so we're flying towards our waypoint. Waypoints are controlled by the Wizzo.
We have a new bogey. Left 25 degrees, 46 miles, 19,000.
All right, Jester, I'm actually going to have you calm down a little bit. Actually, no, I'm going to use the volume control to turn it down a little bit.
It is a friendly.
But the Wizzo has the fine control over the flight system for waypoints, navigation, all of that. That is in their wheelhouse. As the pilot, we interface with that through Jester, either by giving him directed input through navigation, or we could tell him divert to a specific lat long, and then we can type that in. We can tell him to divert to a primary or secondary flight plan if we've added steer points to them. Map markers if we've got them there. Airfields. Or assets. We can have him fly, give us a waypoint or TACAN information to any of the in-flight assets that are available nearby. And I'm going to go and put us in an autopilot hold. So I'm going to activate the system first, and then engage the altitude hold. Now this will keep us in level flight.
Diversion steering set.
But we can also use it to maintain altitude and then set an attitude, and we can orbit. And I'm just going to take a minute here. We're going to orbit over the top of Creech Air Force Base. Also going to reduce power to about 3,000 pounds per side, which is what we can see here on the fuel gauge meter. We're a little higher than that, but we are a little heavier here as well. I don't necessarily want to engage that SA-6 first because we're nearing the end of our first phase. Hey, Creech. We're over you. So this is going to be a little bit of departure from the teaching lessons portion about all the boring nonsense about just getting up here to fly, and get into a little bit of fun, as we're going to talk about these weapon systems in far greater detail through different phases as we talk about those individual systems. But for now, we are going to go ahead and put Jester to work. One of the many features about the F4 that is extremely useful and essential for the work is the bombing table, accessible by right control B by default. And this bombing table has a bunch of information here as far as what mode we're going to be using to try and attack our target. And it will, in each of these little subsets, give us other information that we can program, and then give us some derived information from the information we put in in order to accurately bomb and attack targets. So for example, if we're using the targeting pod, we put this in target find mode. We would select what weapon we're looking to drop, a GBU-10, and then we can continue putting in other information here. For example, our run-in speed. I tend to do about 450 knots true airspeed, which is what TAS is. That's where that true airspeed indicator for the pilot and the Wizzo's indicator are useful for. How high do we expect to be for our release? And then how high is the target off the ground? I'm going to go ahead and preemptively set this to about 4,000 feet.
That's a contact, all right. Left 30 degrees, 44 miles, 36,000.
And as we change things here on top, you can see that it gives you different derived statistics on the bottom. If I was operating with a human Wizzo, for example, if Trigger was riding in the back seat, either he could pull this bombing table up himself and put this information in and then encode the WRCS on his own, or I can pull it up, put the information in, and then direct him. Like, all right, Trigger, we're going to run through a setup. Drag coefficient 1.15. Target altitude 4,400 feet. Target range, we use the ROR slant range, 23,840 feet. Now there's some of those figures are rounded a little bit subject to what he's got in the back seat as far as working the dials and whatnot, because you can't really dial it down to an individual feet. But you can communicate with your Wizzo, tell him what needs to happen, and then if you needed to change things like, I want bomb number 3 to hit my target, you could set a release advance. So if you're dropping a ripple of bombs, bomb number 3 should hit exactly the point of impact that you're looking at, provided everything else is flown correctly. Whereas bombs number 1 and 2 are going to be before the target, and bombs 4 and whatever else are going to be after the target. In this case, I'd tell Jester and close.
Will go.
Now, what I'm going to be using first is an AGM-45 Shrike, and we're going to be making an attack out here on the range against our friend, the SA-6. There he is. Little menacing system, the SA-6, highly mobile, but its straight flush search track radar is really kind of the cornerstone of all of it. And the average altitude out here is about 3,500 feet. That's going to be important as we switch over to WRCS AGM-45, which is part of the loft mode we're going to be using today for the Shrike. Now, the more accurate you can get with the altitude,
Yes, sir.
easier it's going to be to try and hit the target. I'm going to select the station. I'm going to rotate our weapon delivery mode over to the AGM-45, which is the loft mode only for the Shrike. If you wanted to shoot the Shrike in direct, you would use direct mode. And that is determined on the ground with your weapons selector. Set our weapon wheel over to arm, anti-radiation missile. Turn on the master arm.
Okay, that's a new bogey. Left 50 degrees, 31
And we're going
miles,
to turn on the flight director, as these needles here are going to be telling us where that SAM site is as the Shrike's seeker head picks it up. Again, we're going to cover the Shrike in far greater detail when we get around to doing so, a later phase, as we talk through individual weapons, weapon systems, and delivery modes. But because it's always important to go up and have a little fun in DCS, we're going to blow something up. And then also have our introduction to the range. Now at this point I'm using a combination of my RWR to tell me where the SA-6 is looking. And now the needles are alive. And we're hearing that tone from the Shrike seeker head. I'm going to pause here briefly. The goal with the Shrike is to try and put this cross in the center of our little wings here, flight director, which lets us know that we're pointed more or less right at the site. Then we're going to want to put our pipper on top of the target and try and hold it there. And since I'm using loft mode, I'll be looking at the indexers to tell me when to pull up. These little lower carrots here that looks like an inverted V pointing up at the sky will tell me that that's my pull-up cue. I will pull up until I am in the circle, which normally indicates, good angle of attack for landing. That will tell me that I'm in a good position to shoot the Shrike. But in order to use it in the locked mode, I need to know approximately what the altitude is of the target site. Now we are kind of pointed right at it. That tone gets louder as the Shrike is nearer to the actual target. I think we still have a little bit of distance to go. Oh yeah, we have a lot still, so I'm gonna go ahead and maintain a climb.
New bogey, left 5 degrees, 40 miles, 21,500. Good IFF, friendly coming.
And because I have a landmark in the form of this town kind of just under the Pipper here, I know about where I need to go. If I was doing this out in the real world, I'd either be reliant entirely upon the Shrike's tone, common sense things like, hey, there's a field here that looks like it's got some stuff on it. Or, best case of all, a smoke trail that's not aimed at me. And so they're somewhere about in there. I'm going to start actually flying at them now.
Okay, we've got mud, 2 o'clock, F-4E.
What we're doing now is just waiting for the jet to go. Alright, cool, I think the trigonometry is right. If you pull up now and throw the missile at a 30-degree expected launch,
31 miles.
it should get over the top of the target and fall on top of it.
Friendly target getting the IFF return.
There's our... Oh, lost it there for a second. Pull up Q. Kind of fly straight as we can, and Magnum. And we're going to defend. Defend very aggressively. Just get completely under the mountains here. He did shoot at us. And that's okay, because the Shrike found him. It is guiding very well. Just double check and make sure we're not in a bad spot. And that's a kill on an SA-6. Welcome back, folks. Did destroy that SA-6. Never fear, though. We've got an SA-8 that's out here at about 3950 feet. Let's go ahead and reset ourselves. And we can engage the next target, too. The elevator pitch there for the Shrike, just to be super quick about it. when you're using it in loft mode is what you need to know is the approximate altitude that your sight is shooting from, so that you can put the seeker head of the Shrike as close as it can get to falling on top of the target. Because the Shrike itself has a very narrow seeker head. Like, you gotta try and put that weapon within 3 degrees of the target.
Left 45, 33 miles, 19,000.
In order for the weapon to try and guide. Knowing the altitude that he is operating from allows us to solve the equation of when do I need to pull up based on the owned ship's aircraft's airspeed, altitude, position. If I know where the ground is supposed to be, we can program that, and that will tell the computer, hey, pull up here. And you should be able to get the weapon close enough to do the job. Here's our shoot cue. Holding the pickle button down, and Magnum. And I'm going to go ahead and just put myself in that altitude hold mode. We might have overshot him, unless that Shrike just loses some energy right now and falls. Yeah, we didn't have a clear line of sight. So instead our missile is overshooting the target. But this is a good example of basically the math that's involved there for it, and why we have to put the pipper in certain places. I aimed a little too far ahead, so I told the missile that this spot right about here where it's fallen right now is at the SAM site's altitude. And it said, okay, cool, go ahead and pitch up now and throw this weapon. And it is falling down, looking down here going, I should be seeing a SAM, and I don't. That's okay. We'll go ahead and try and just bomb this SA-8. Try and race his lock-to-launch timer. And we'll use a radar-assisted bombing mode known as dive toss. Plane out of autopilot and reset our master warnings here. So this is the part of the range that we're going to be spending a lot of time at. I've kind of built this area out here at Yucca Pass to be my catch-all sort of teaching area. I've got anti-radiation threats that can be here. I've got armored targets that can be here. Convoys that can be here. And over time we're going to attack all of them, using all of the different weapons available to the F-4. I also have an unattended target range, which is out here next to Creech, and it's got some mock-up targets, little area formations there, a mock SAM site. That one won't shoot at us, but still nice to have. Try and get below these clouds here today as they have drifted into a spot that is less than ideal for us. They hit the SAM site rather well today. he is right there. That little tan patch. And the thing about the SA-8 and the F4's RWR is that it'll give you the new guy ping for his search. And it really doesn't give a whole lot as far as when it is shot at you all the time. SA-8 might actually be one that's in its system to go ahead and alert you to let you know that it's fired, but not every SAM site does for the F4. Unlike other RWRs, which are like, hey, it shot at you, here's your warning. Some of the newer SAM systems don't operate that way when it comes to the F4. You have to use the handoff mode, which we will talk about in greater detail going forward. But for now, let's go ahead and use our contextual button here. Trying to escape Mr. Sam site. I think we got him. Since this is a training mission, I do have the feedback up. Generally, I don't fly with that. I'm doing my day-to-day server stuff. Alright, so if you guys have questions out there for the folks that are watching, feel free to drop those in chat and we can talk about or cover things in the jet. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and continue bombing their target area here. We've got several different threats that are up. Try and deal with more of the gun-based air defenses now that the missile threat is gone. I think that actually got... Yeah, I didn't get that one at all. Damaged a lot of little stuff. Let's go ahead and change our WRCS altitude here a little bit, because that's 4130 feet. Turn Jester up just a little bit again. Now 4,000 pounds of gas on board, so we should have enough to put our last 3 bombs downrange.
I'm captured.
Alright, that looks like that did the work there for that site. Now we still have a Sparka battery and a Shilka battery there. Those are going to be the ones that we attack with our laser-guided bombs. So let's go ahead and make sure that we've got some decent ranging information there. It's going to be about 4,080 feet. Keep trying to use my numeric keypad.
Roger.
And that is not the way. Okay, so 17 mils down on the site, we should be able to... We'll start with this, the Shilka battery that's a little more dangerous to us. Put the Pipper on the target, half action, change modes, full action to engage the laser.
Going a speeding 520.
Very fast. Pull back on the throttle some. Just holding the Pipper button down. Watching the bomb fall line get to where it needs to go.
Passing through 510.
Pickle, bombs off the jet. They're now heavy on the left side. Try and keep the Pipper on the target. Not Pipper, but targeting pod on the target. Impact. Cave Spike does the work. There's not a lot of words that you thought you'd hear together in the same place. We put a lot of work in the last handful of weeks here on the channel. Really gives the F-4 some good precision instruments there. But for those who have operated with any of the other pods, this one is very simple. And it's daytime only. It's a TV pod. It's not infrared at all. We're just about at our bingo fuel level though, so we do need to hurry it up. I'm trying to fly to keep the 3 dots aligned.
550 and cracking. There's 560.
Which will tell me that I'm flying in a good way, that the bomb is aligned to where we're looking. See our GBU-10 following on down there. Try and keep that laser pointed in the center. And kaboom. Alright, so navigation home. Check out of the range here. We're going to go ahead and set a set ourselves another map marker. For Nellis. And first I'm going to fly the TACAN beacon because that should be pointed more or less directly at the target. And I'm even going to move our marker so it is right on top of the TACAN. At this point we've been flying for a little while.
Left 20, 47 miles, 23,000.
2,600 pounds in the jet, which should have plenty to get home.
Target paints, that is a friendly.
Let's go ahead and select a divert to marker
Roger.
for Nellis.
Steering set in TGT-1.
So we are showing 63 miles home and just right of the nose there. And that is much further right and 64 miles because we've got drift. Been flying long enough that there is now drift imparted to the INS system.
I see a contact.
And that loss of accuracy can be enough to,
20,000.
if you're using it as your exclusive reference for going from point A to point B, it can throw your aim off.
IFS checks out.
Because if it's like, all right, I need to be flying exactly on this waypoint, if you line yourself up to fly perfect because you're flying in the dark, you might actually be misaligned enough that you'll miss the target by miles. You know, because it's showing the Nellis is like out here instead of here. A little further right and a little farther away. One of the things that I try and do, and we'll do it when we get on the ground here, is to fix the alignment system manually, which does involve a trip to the back seat. Unless you have a Wizzo who can provide that correction for you. At this point, we're just kind of on a cruise back home. Kind of milk the fuel consumption down there to about 3,000 per side. That's it's about where I like to sit, as it gives me a pretty good economy for speed and fuel flow rate. Honestly, if I wasn't an empty jet, I would probably be I would have looked for a tanker probably 1,000 pounds ago. And depending upon where one was, fly out to it or start making my way home. J79s are very hungry engines. But we are flying at just about Mach 0.7, which puts us into the same sort of place as the F-14. for its kind of best economy cruise. Now, something that's important, and we'll talk about this one again in later detail when we're doing air-to-air type work, is the
Fuel
centerline
check.
rack.
What are we at?
We're okay for now, only because we're going home. But this centerline rack being present has its own little interlock, which you can see right here. Centerline tank light. If that light is on, your front two sparrows will not fire. So in this case, we've got, you know, our pave spike pod, so we don't have a sparrow in that recess, but we do have one more up front. And the reason for it is simple. Because these are semi-recessed, they have to fall away from the aircraft first before they fire. And if you're carrying some bombs out here, and those bombs stick out about right here, you're in the way of the missile. It can't fall without hitting, potentially, a bomb on the rack. So that interlock is a safety feature that prevents the launch of the front sparrows as long as the centerline rack is on. If you are going up to do mostly air-to-air work, you need to make sure that you have either ejected that rack or didn't carry it in the first place. Which means if you are going up with extra fuel tanks, you should be drawing from the centerline tank first. If you're carrying all 3 bags. And selectively jettison that rack by selecting stores, which is the full down position there on that dial, selecting the centerline rack, and sending it away. Now we're in a position to fight. This light is out, and we can use all of our available sparrows. "21 miles ago, we were definitely back in super friendly territory, so we can go and turn on our lights. And we'll even take the time to communicate with the ATC tower. I'm really kind of looking forward to the day when DCS either fixes, updates, or gets rid of that. Because it is a dated system. Okay, and on this right wall, we didn't talk about it through our cockpit walk around, but this wall contains our formation light brightness, our formation lights themselves, on and off, and some of our other light controls. But this one right here, this gray knob, is the AOA stall warning light. I'm actually going to turn that one down a little bit for you folks, as that controls the AOA aural tone system up to a certain point. After a certain point, it will be on whether you have that volume setting down or up and play at maximum volume. But for our purposes coming into land, if we're doing it right and flying on AOA, it should give us a solid tone more or less all the way down, which is also indicated here on our AOA indicator by this little impression out here at about, what is that, 20-ish units? Yeah, thereabouts. Other things of import is that if we are actually flying on AOA, we need to be able to see down the nose. So the seat control is important. It's located here on the seat. It's going to go ahead and raise that seat all the way up. We're now overflying Nellis. Go ahead and take her out of autopilot. And we're going to descend. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the Morse code beep beep beeps for the VOR. Set ourselves for VOR TACAN. Dial in the runway heading and turn on the flight director. We're just going to extend a little bit here. And start adjusting our trim. We're getting the Morse code beeps from that system. And we're just going to turn around here and line ourselves up for 2-1 left. A little above glide slope. And as light as we are being low on gas, actually push down to nearly our proper landing speed.
Warning lights, anti-skid.
She does have a drogue chute. She does tend to fly with the drogue chute. So you can actually stop her pretty quick, which can also accommodate some a little bit higher landing speeds, a little bit flatter trajectory, a little more like a MiG-21 to come in and land. Because remember too,
1,000.
you don't want the nose to be too high, or you risk a tail strike on landing. Okay, power's idle. Drogue chute's deployed. Haven't applied any braking pressure yet, we're just using the drogue. Okay, pull the flaps up, change to our taxi light. Still dragging our drogue, as I don't want to leave FOD here for the next guy. Or gal. whomsoever happens to come down and land behind me. It's nobody, it's a single player server right now, but thought counts. What we're going to do is we're going to taxi off the runway here, and then we will do a realignment of the jet, which is something that I recommend doing after a couple hours of flying. Depending upon what you're up to in DCS, like if you're up in the air and you're doing like a mimic real mission, like a mock mission like that, and you're going to spend hours just burning holes in clouds, getting gas from the tanker, flying and orbiting, waiting the 2.5 to 3 hours before you drop a single bomb, then you're going to want to know how to do that in the air. And that's going to involve a reference point, overflying the reference point. But if you're doing like most things in DCS, you're probably going to deploy a whole bunch of weapons inside your first hour or two. Let's go ahead and release that drogue. So now that you're here, you're back at the base, you're getting ready to get your arms and equipment back on. You turn off the Morse code troopy chirps, the VOR system. And as a pilot, your job here is mostly done. But if you're flying on your own, you go ahead and set up a our TGT-1 here.
Steering set for diversion.
Okay, so we can tell right now from our system that it should be 62 miles away from us, and on a course of about 300 back to our point. And if I try and draw a line as close as I can from ourselves back up to about there, you see that that's actually fairly close, at least from the points that I drew it, which are themselves off. So clearly we are a little bit out of alignment, not by a lot, but we're here, so we're going to try and fix that as best we can. The first step that I have to doing that is to get your own ship's position, which I will do by hitting left alt and left clicking on myself using that very handy quality of life feature from DCS. And this provides us with coordinates in all of the different formats DCS can possibly use. The one we're most concerned with is this one on top, lat long standard, as we don't have a whole lot of complexity here in the jet. So if you're by yourself, you'll jump into the back seat, and as intimidating and as restrictive and confining as all this is, we're not worried about it. We're going to come right down here to the navigation panel. Is this panel right here. And what we're going to do first is put it in set mode. So we're going to take this position updater switch and advance it forward. It does lock. But what we've done now is we are disconnecting the INS system from its gyro, which it's using for position keeping, so that we can reset the center position for where we are. And we're going to do that by using these top two push buttons and turns. These bottom two here are for setting a target waypoint, which is not what we're doing, so we're not concerned about those. We are concerned about our position lamps, which are up here. So right now, checking here, so I have to turn my head with track IR. Lat long standard is 361330. 3616. Well, that's not right. So we're going to push the knob. I'm rolling that back around to 3613, and it is a little further. So we'll give it a slight tick just to be kind of in the position we want, and let go. Now we see that the lat light for sync has turned on. That means that we have moved this dial far enough that we can now engage a synchronization with it. We're going to repeat the process for the longitude. This one here says that we are 11503, 1150242. Well, that's not right. So 11502. And a little tick, so we're about halfway there. This one did not move far enough to turn on the lamp, so it doesn't have a significant error in it yet. That's okay. You're not always going to have both those lights on. If you've been flying for a very long time, or you're using an inferior alignment method, it's possible that that will be way off and therefore turn on. But for our purposes, this is set. Now, if I was doing this in the air, what I would do is the Wizzo is select one of our common points, whether it is a TACAN beacon, which is the most ideal, because if I just directly overfly the TACAN beacon, I know exactly where that point is and there's no confusion about it. Or I can pick a visually distinctive marker. We'll actually go with a hotel here on the strip. And I think we'll go with the Notlagio. And its fountains here. We could also do the Stratosphere, but we'll use the Notlagio here. And we would do the same thing. We'd pick this waypoint, we'd update our information, and as we've gotten near it, we would do what we're going to be doing now, which is hold the fix switch until the lights go out. Now, if I was overflying that point, I would wait until the exact moment the pilot goes, we're here, and then let go, and the system is aligned and it's now counting down again. Since we're on the ground, I can just, wait till the lights go out and then let it go. And now it's back in good position, and we can hit 1, return back to the front seat. And we can see that our waypoint is now 65 miles away and pointing at roughly the same position, which is more accurate to what we were doing. The last thing I'm going to cover for the teaching lesson for today is the pylon limitations for the jet. In this particular setup, we've actually got something on every single pylon, but there are some limitations that one needs to be aware of. The first one is that your outermost wing pylons, the heaviest bomb that you can put on it individually is going to be a GBU-10, a GB-8, or a Mark 84, in the 2,000-pound class. The Walleye 2 is not available on this pylon, but Walleye 1 is. You can also put fuel tanks on the outermost pylons. Drop deployed cluster munitions that are kind of fired from like a reverse rocket pod. Target marker flares, or the Su-23 gun pod, which takes the M61A1 cannon and puts it in a gun pod with 1,200 rounds, which can be very useful. And a myriad of rockets, which can include the Zunis in triple racks or singles or doubles. Actually do double rack Zunis as well. It also carries strikes on the outer pylon and bullpup A and B missiles, but not bullpup Cs. And if you're looking for just pure volume, up to 6 Mark 82s. The 8R, 8L, and 2L, 2R pylons are special pylons. These are the air-to-air rails for Sidewinders. That's the only missile that they can carry. Due to the arms limitations I have in this particular mission, AIM-9Ms are not available, but they are normally available for the jet, as are some other missiles like the AIM-9 Julie and AIM-9 P5s. You can also put ACMI pods on it if you're doing that kind of a type scenario where you would want to put one on there for the looks. Smoke winders, of course. But the biggest thing is that the interstation rail is where you can put some of the heaviest weapons. In this particular case, you can carry the Walleye 2 TV guided bomb, GB8s, GB24s, myriad of bombs, but as you can tell here on the armament page, some of these are listed as special weapons adapter, and some are not. Any of the ones that are not, like this AGM-12C bullpup, which is the larger model bullpup, cannot carry Sidewinder missiles on the Sidewinder rails. And the reason for it is pretty simple. It's fin collision. That's the problem. It's going to take a minute to refuel the aircraft from 9% fuel if I were to do that, but what it boils down to is if I'm sitting out here and I got these Sidewinders on the rail, the special adapter separates the rail a little bit and gives the kind of room that you need so that you don't have fin collisions as a possibility. Without the special rail adapter, the weapons sit higher and they have fin collision with your Sidewinders, and therefore you can't use them. Things like the Maverick missiles, like, oh, well, you could put the special weapon adapter on it and then put the triple rack on it. Why, that sounds like it should fit. It doesn't. It sits too low. You can put single racks on, so you can still carry a Maverick missile on those two stations, or a Shrike. But any of the heavier weapons, if you're going for like a dedicated strike type loadout, those are going to occupy the whole pylon and not allow you to carry Sidewinders up for defensive armament. Anything on the special weapon adapter, however, can, because it does have that pylon. So for example, you can carry a pair of GBU-12s and your Sidewinder missiles and not have any fin collision type problems. You can carry, as we did today, the AGM-45 Shrike. You can carry a Maverick, A, B, or D. But not G. The heavier Maverick takes up the whole rail. So there are some weight concerns that are a problem with the special weapons adapter, as well as fin collision concerns. If you are going up for pure strike in one form or another, maybe you don't need the Sidewinders available to you. So that's always an option as well. The inner pylon stations 8 and 2 are not plumbed for fuel. But you can carry like an ECM pod on them instead, so that you can carry a mixture of the ECM pod and the pave spike pod. The Sparrow recesses can really only carry Sparrows, except for the recess in Station 4, which is the forward right-hand side, where you can carry the pave spike pod, which does have a couple of different versions. In this particular mission, I only have the slower, older pave spike pod on, but there is a fast or smart track pod, which does have some faster movement and some better tracking and holding capability when you are designating a target. Or you can carry the ECM pod up here. So if you're doing a seed mission in particular, for the cost of one Sparrow, you can put that pod on and then carry Shrikes and fuel tanks and bombs and whatever else you need on the other rails. Otherwise, E, E2, F, or M Sparrows can be carried on board. Your centerline space is not plumbed for missiles at all, but you can carry a large variety of freefall bombs. None of them guided. So, it's going to be things like Snake Eyes, Mark 82s, Mark 84s, various SAMP bombs. Personally, I'm a fan of the M117 750-pound bombs. Those are a lot of fun to drop. You can also carry a gun pod on the center line, more marker flares on the center line, more cluster dispensers on the center line, and rockets on the center line in the Mighty Mouse FFAR variety. I believe you can carry... No, I don't think you can carry Zunis on that one. I don't think I arms limited just the Zunis out of the center line. But it's possible. I'd have to go back and check it. A lot of different armament configuration potentials there, and of course the CMS pod, countermeasures pod, these are attached to the backs of stations 8 and 2. And you can equip it with nothing but chaff, nothing but flares, or mixtures of flares and chaff. Generally I do the 30 flares, 60 chaff. That's kind of the best balance on all of that one. And that is the only way to carry countermeasures on board the jet. If you decide that you want to go ahead and go with not carrying one at all, doesn't matter what these settings over here say, you won't have countermeasures on board the jet because you don't have the dispenser.
Request refueling. Request rearming. Copy.
Down here with 790 pounds worth of fuel. And now she's filling up. She will refill up, or rather she will refuel fairly quickly, up to about 10,000 pounds. From 10,000 to 12,000 pounds, that last fuel cell on board the jet takes a while to refill. So if you are looking to do air refueling, it takes about as long to go from about 2,000 pounds of gas up to 10,000 pounds as it does to go from 10,000 pounds to 12,000 pounds. So if you are flying on a mission like that, generally speaking, the first couple thousand pounds out of the jet are for takeoff. Get airborne, get up to speed, get a good positive climb rate, that kind of deal. And then start your mission. If you're going to go refuel, I'd really only recommend going up to about 10,000 pounds. Otherwise, you're going to be hogging the boom while everybody else is waiting on you, especially in a multi-wire player environment. Being at about 10,000 pounds, you can fly just about anywhere you need to go and then get back to the tanker, top off again if you need to, and fly home. Now, something that's also important for Wizzos, just because we're talking about basic systems on board the jet, is that this is the only totalizer on board the aircraft. There is no totalizer in the back seat to let you know how much fuel is on board the jet. However, we do have this little window and if we zoom in a bit, you see about resetting my head tracking here first. Oh, you know what? The seat's in the way because the seat's raised. Or is it? Well, usually I can see through that little window over the pilot's shoulder what the fuel state is. That's sad. Alright, so yeah, I used to be able to see what the fuel state is from the back seat by looking over the pilot's right shoulder and catching the top part of that gauge. I don't know if it's just a matter of my seat being out of position, or what, but yeah, it's just under the RWR display. Yeah, as we can see, just the short time that we've been doing this, we got up to about 9,300 pounds, and now things are very slow. Yeah, that would figure for Jester. It sounds like Jester's approach. So, refueling the aircraft up to about this point, fairly fast. Hanging on to get to about 10,000 pounds, not so bad. Hanging on for an entire full tank of gas while you're airborne tanking like that, doing air refueling, could be a problem if you're waiting on if the rest of your friends are waiting on you. So, it's things to keep in mind.
Canopy down and locked, lights out and stripes aligned.
Yeah, that seat is just in the way. Anyway, that's why Jester will ask you from time to time what the fuel state is and how we're looking. Alright, so as far as future things go, because today's mission was mostly just about startup, the cockpit walk around, navigation, and a little bit of range familiarity. Most of what we're going to be doing is going to be down here in and around Yucca Pass, as I've built that part of the range out for that purpose. If anyone's watched my previous videos and VODs and streams and things like that, I use Yucca Pass a lot for just about testing every air-to-ground weapon on board the aircraft. But we will mix things up a little bit, especially when we do things like in-flight refueling and kind of a mixed mission, because there is a simulated mission here at Alamo that involves attacking an SA-2 site and its supporting structures, and it is defended and patrolled by, you don't see them here up here, but there are MiG-21s that orbit kind of in the area that are protecting that airspace, so we'll need to get in and deal with those as a future mission setup. There's also just getting around the range itself, avoiding Groom Lake and its no-fly zone, as that is a very bad time for us. And we do have an air-to-air range out here near the Tonopah test range on the north end of the NTTR. Should be a good time. A lot of things going forward. We're going to be working with a lot of air-to-ground weapons here in the next one, mostly of the unguided type variety. So we're looking at the iron bombs, rockets, dispensers, marker flares, that kind of thing. That's going to be next week's primary push. We will work with guided weapons in the air-to-ground mode the week after that, which will include things like the Bullpup, the Shrike, Maverick missiles. Bullpup's going to be a lot of fun. That's a fun weapon to use, but takes a little bit of practice with it if you're unfamiliar with the guidance profile. Also includes Walleye, GB-8, the laser-guided bombs we dropped today using the paved track pod.
Refueling complete.
You know, all of those kinds of things. And then we'll also spend some time with air-to-air modes and kind of showing some of the different properties of the missiles that we've got available in jet, and talking a little bit about older generation Sidewinder missiles, which were rear aspect only, versus newer generation Sidewinder missiles, starting with the L variant, but also including the Mike variant and the P5 variant missiles, which have all aspect seeker heads and can be fired head on.
Rearming complete.
It'll be a good time. And then we'll also talk about some basic tactics, how we do what we do, things that we're looking for, and finish the sequences up with backseat work in particular, detailing the backseat as we did the front seat, and talking through some of those details and features. It's possible that we might actually see Trigger, who usually does Wizzo work for me, in the backseat during some of these as well. Some of that is just dependent upon whether or not he wakes up in his early afternoon, since he is across the pond from us. With that, though, we are going to go ahead and close things out for this morning. And as you can see on the screen, we do have other events coming up. Tuesday, we're going to be back for DCS, just doing some general flying. It's not really a teaching stream like today's is on Saturdays, but should be a good time just to get up and have a good time and fly and blow things up. Do a little bit of classic games type things on Tuesday as well. Friday night, we should be back with Arma 3, playing through our Anastasia campaign. Saturday, I work this coming Saturday at the day job, so Saturday will have to be pre-recorded and it'll be posted at the same time as the stream, so you can catch that VOD here or visit the YouTube channel to take a look at that. I should have that uploaded by that time. With that, though, always ask for consent. Try to communicate as best you can with your partners. Try to be genuinely decent human beings. But I will catch up with you next time. Thanks for watching, folks. Have a great day, and Pilum out.